Hi folks, how are you? My name is Enda Young, and today we're going to talk about conflict resolution, negotiation and mediation, and the importance of those processes for you.
So welcome to Profile 3 TV, and today we're very excited to be talking to Enda Young, and today we're going to talk about conflict resolution and many more things. So Enda, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks Kieran, thanks for inviting me, mate.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do now.
Yeah, so my name's Enda Young. I often joke with groups that I'm training that I'm a recovering mechanical engineer. So that was my first degree, my first passion. But when I was 16, 17 years old, a group came in and did a day training on mediation with me when I was young. And I was like, wow, what is this thing called mediation and how do I do that for a living? So finished my degree in engineering and went back to Queen's and got a degree in focusing on conflict resolution, conflict transformation, and really got the bug for that. And that's really what I've been involved with in one shape or form or other now for the guts of almost 20 years. So I've worked in mediation. I'm a qualified mediator with the Mediation Institute of Ireland, the International Mediation Institute, and I now work full-time as a programme director for the Jaqen Leadership Institute, which is part of the School of Management at Queen's University in Belfast.
Amazing. And obviously Queen's University, you know, we all know it, oh my word, grew up in it, looking at the amazing buildings and everything else, but maybe a lot of people don't know, they know of the Institute and the School of Business, but maybe you tell us a little bit about what happens there and what goes on.
So we're based in the beautiful grounds up in Riddle Hall, just up in Strimbillis. We're part of the School of Management and we're the executive education part of the school. So what that means is we train a lot of companies, a lot of organisations in leadership. Wherever you're at in your career, we have a leadership course for you. So one of the courses that I run, which is Aspire Leaders, if normally, let's say you're in that stage in your career where you've been really good at your job and all of a sudden you're managing your first team. What's that shift? What new skill set do you need to be thinking about in terms of now all of a sudden going from managing yourself to managing 12 people? And quite often, because you've been good at your job, you're just thrown into that. But actually, that Aspiring Leaders course then looks at, well, how do we tease out? How do you get things done more effectively? How do you manage your time? How do you really look at your own communication skill and your team skills, for example? But my passion is negotiation and mediation. So the other course that I run up there is looking at negotiation and how to have difficult conversations and how do we influence each other. Within the Institute, then we have a course for you wherever you're at in your career. So if you're a chief executive, if you're on a board, there's a course to match where you're at in your career. And then we also have a load of bespoke courses. So a lot of major companies would come to us and go, listen, we would love a leadership development program for 50 of our staff, senior staff team, and we would work along with you over 6 months, a year to develop a bespoke program which helps move your organisation along.
Incredible. So what a facility here beside us. I've been up at Riddle Hall many times.
It's a beautiful building.
Yeah, amazing. So actually you really help train individuals, leaders in businesses here locally and internationally.
Absolutely. So a lot of, because of the nature of, I guess, of the building that we have, a lot of people tend to come to us and we see that as a huge asset because the nature of most businesses or most organisations at the minute, whether you're in the public or private sector or wherever you're at, people are busy. So actually coming into the grounds of Riddle Hall and having 2 days, most of our courses would be maybe 1 day or 2 days at a time, maybe over 6 months or a year, having that space to actually reflect on where you're at and learn, looking at the latest theories and practices and actually being able to operationalise them and bring them back to you. So whether you're a CEO of a major company here, working in retail, working for government institution or local council, it gives you that time and that space to actually get a breathing space, and you couple that with real learning.
And it's off-site as well, so that's a key thing. Getting away from the office, the phone ringing, the door knocking.
100%, and we do go to organisations. We do a bit of in-house work. So when people would want us to come, maybe for cost reasons or whatever they want, so we do that. And we also work internationally as well. So a lot of the work I would do as well would be based in Geneva. So I work with organisations such as the World Health Organisation, and I've spent quite a bit of time in Dubai and Malaysia, working out there for maybe a week at a time as well. And we ourselves we would run our mini MBA in China. So I have a colleague who's gone out in a few weeks' time to China, India. So we've been to Canada. So we do have international pieces of work as well.
Incredible. And is it? You mentioned a couple of industries. Is it industry specific or
everyone? So it's literally, we've trained most major organisations and companies over the last 7 years, 8 years of the existence of the Institute. So we have open courses. Any individual can come along throughout the year. And then, as I said, we have the bespoke courses, which we basically listen to what you need and design around you.
Incredible. So I imagine, yeah, very specific. So if it was retail or hospitality, you can really zone in on what's happening in that space.
Exactly. So, like, we have a mini MBA, which is happening this week, which is a 5-day course, which is an intense 5 days looking at marketing and strategy and financial managers and that. And that's an open course. And we're also running that soon now for barristers in this part of the world, which is going to be looking at how do they then be entrepreneurial and open up their own. We're also looking at a retail specific version of that, which basically then we will bespokely look at the case study throughout the week, for example, and make it useful to that industry. So
and I guess again, as a leader in a business, people probably forget that they need to develop as well, learn new skills, actually take time out and assess where they are. Is that
absolutely? I think it's a huge thing, and I think that looking at your own CPD, and I think people can get really caught into it's been 5 or 6 years since you've taken a look at you, because you're so busy looking at your team. You're so busy looking at growth, you're so busy looking at whatever that might be, but actually get the time to reflect on who you are, and looking at the latest theories and practice, and we tie that in then to the school management, and we get the latest academic thinking, but it's very much based on the practical, experiential. Okay, here's some new stuff, now go do. And how will that impact you when you go back to wherever you work? You know, if it's local government or if it's a big organisation or a big major company, how's it going to change? How's it going to shift your behaviour for the better? Yeah. And how's it going to impact your team?
Incredible. And I'm going to pull you back now and talk about conflict resolution and negotiating. So something I could definitely do with someone. So what's the benefits then of negotiating or understanding conflict resolution?
I think it's huge. I mean, my thing I would say is I think that conflict resolution should be taught to everyone. I think it should be taught in schools. I think it should be almost as widespread as getting taught how to use a fire extinguisher, right? Because we all deal with conflict. We all have involved with conflict at some stage in our lives, at most stages in our lives. And conflict in itself isn't inherently negative. I mean, if you think about some of the best relationships you have, they're the ones that we handle conflict the best with, and productively. But it's when conflict becomes destructive, obviously, that things happen. People go off on stress, people leave their jobs, people suffer from mental health issues, people just don't like going into work, for example, you know, and it can be huge. I mean, recently I was looking at some research saying, you know, most people, piece of research in the south of Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, that said people go through 3 hours of conflict on average a week, you know, and if you look at how much, looking at some of the research over from London as well, how many tens of millions it costs the UK economy every year just from conflict and, you know, people being off work, you know, because of it. So it's a huge impact both on you as an individual and obviously in organisations and companies throughout, you know.
Scary, yeah. When I'm thinking, as you say, you're saying how many times, I'm thinking this.
Absolutely, yeah.
And have you seen? Is there common causes still of conflicts, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky enough to have worked here on everything from the interfaces and most major businesses, and quite a bit internationally as well. And my thing is, I think people are people. Conflict is conflict. Hurt is hurt. Harm is harm. Right. The language might change. The values of money might change and things like that. But actually, people are people. So things like poor communication, you know, it's not a surprise to hear. That's, for me as a professional mediator, is one of the key things that you see from all the time, wherever you're at. You know, misinterpretation of tonality in emails.
Easy one.
And easy on WhatsApp groups now that companies have them more and more. Looking at people being micromanaged, you know, and one term that you see more and more is the sense of autonomy. If we remove people's sense of autonomy, I guarantee you that conflict will grow from that point. So this idea, if somebody is micromanaged within an inch of their lives, if they have no say in their own direction of their own career, of what they do when they go in at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning, if we remove people's sense of autonomy, that conflict grows, and destructive conflict can very much grow out of that. Poor communication, lack of respect, people's inability to genuinely listen to each other, I think is a huge thing, you know, and you see that more and more. I think we should be all trained in how to listen as part of every career that we do. And one other one that I see over and over again is this gap, and it's the gap between the intention of what we wanted out of that email, out of that line management meeting, and the impact that it has. And the bigger that gap, the more there is a chance for destructive conflict. And that's not really what I meant by that email, but that's how I took it. That's what I went home with. That's the emotion that you left me with.
Yes, and these are some of the maybe causes and mistakes that businesses make when they're trying to avoid conflict resolution.
Absolutely. And you couple that with people's own natural conflict style. So one of the first things you do on, I think, any good course, and specifically any courses that I would run, would be looking at what your style is. Well, do you kind of enjoy conflict? Do you do everything you can to avoid conflict at all costs, or do you naturally try and collaborate or compromise? What's your own style? And one of the theories is each of us has a default style, a style that we tend to go back to as a path of least resistance when we're tired, when our own emotional resilience is low. So what is your default style that you tend to lapse back to? And then how can you be flexible? How can you move? And this is where I think very much so good conflict resolution ties into absolutely good leadership skills. As a leader, how can you flex, in terms of your style, even when you don't want to? I remember working with somebody in HR recently, and this individual fantastic at their job, but actually when you delved into them, and I do a lot of executive coaching, didn't really like working with people a lot. Head of HR, but actually was fantastic at their job and was very much liked. But because they had to act out of their default most days into work, they went home absolutely wrecked every night. But that was okay because they were self-aware enough to know that. But what happens when that level of self-awareness isn't there, or because you don't have the time to focus on you and who you are and what you believe and what your triggers are, what your hot buttons are, and what your staff teams are. And then the other thing I would chat to people a lot about in terms of that is, how do you see you as a leader or manager, and how do your staff team see you in terms of your ability to deal and cope with conflict? And is there a gap there? And for most of us, there's a gap at some level, but how big's that gap?
Yeah, amazing. I'm just having a heart attack now. As you say, we're all focused on sales, productivity, everything else. Never thought of the need for conflict resolution training and support, and now I'm thinking, as you said, and I can identify people who would love conflict. I know them, love them. I know people that will avoid it at all costs, and everything's yes. So everything you say is amazing. Yeah, very good.
And I think conflict resolution, negotiation, mediation, there's a tendency sometimes to tie that into to the soft skills and things like that, but I would say they're fundamental, because I've seen small conflicts in work people become almost preoccupied by it. And that small conflict, which can be perceived to be small by an outsider or an external mediator, for example, somebody like myself, can be actually all-encompassing for that person. They go home every night, every weekend, and it takes over. And then you look at negotiation skills, looking at from everything from Brexit, looking at the news at the minute, to your ability to have a negotiation with your people, your nearest and dearest at home. How many negotiations do you have before you get into work in the morning? How many negotiations you have in your own head with yourself first, and then with those which we love and live with, right? Okay. So that for me, it trickles into your private life and your everyday life as well.
And that's where mediation comes in then.
Absolutely. So mediation is when an independent third party becomes invited into a dispute, or it's an alternative dispute resolution mechanism. And when I looked at this one, when I was introduced to it when I was a teenager, I was like, wow, what is this? Look at the skills involved in this. And it's not overly widely known. Most people, in my experience, when they come to a point where they just want to do something differently with the conflict within their organisation or the business or whatever that might be, will take anything. They'll just go, I'll try anything, when they get to a certain point. And somebody, maybe HR or whatever that might be, who might offer mediation, they go, don't really know what that is. So actually, one of the first things I tend to find with mediation is actually an educational element of what is mediation. The fact that it's a voluntary process. The fact that confidentiality is key, that whatever said within a mediation stays within the mediation, the fact that anyone can leave at any stage, the fact that normally when a third party comes in is uninvolved with the previous conversations and they're coming in with a fresh set of eyes. And one of the key things I find as well is getting the message across that mediation is a fantastic tool, but it's not a magic bullet for all conflicts. Sometimes it's not appropriate, sometimes the timing isn't right. And it isn't there to replace formal grievance procedures. It should be, when it works well, it should ride alongside. So sometimes there is a general grievance for many, many reasons, and that's a separate process. But the key thing about mediation, it should be about the restoration of relationships. So if you want and have to work with that individual who you've fallen out with in your office, maybe you're returning from work, mediation, when it works, when all parties want it to work, can really help to improve that level of relationship when people come back in, for example.
Amazing. So and mediation and conflict resolution can really help businesses then move forward as well?
Absolutely, because without mediation, sometimes people then can take that to formal grievances, people can leave organisations, people can go to court. And one of the things about mediation is it helps that deeper level of relationship. So for a business, what you're doing is you're training staff, you're changing the atmosphere and the culture of an organisation. You're really, and what I kind of say to people is, even when we go in to train people in mediation, I'm not saying everyone's going to be a mediator. For example, to be a mediator with the Mediation Institute of Ireland, whoever that might be, there's a 60-hour course. There's a lot of work involved in that, which is I think is absolutely fantastic. But what I would say is, if you're coming in to do a 1 or 2 day course with somebody like myself, you come away with mediative communication skills, which I think is key to any business or any organisation. It's key to good leadership. The ability, and I go back to this, the ability to genuinely listen and to hear. That's a skill that we can teach people. And the ability to just summarise and paraphrase and deconstruct. The ability to be able to map. If you are a manager and you have a huge falling out within your organisation, the tools that you can do to be able to map visually those breakdown relationships, and then think about some of the tools that you can start to use, or bring in third-party organisations such as myself or other organisations in the middle of that. Yes. And why? To really help the relationship. So it saves money, it saves time, but fundamentally it helps those individuals, because as I've already said, conflict can become all-consuming for people, and the real human element of, let's say you've been bullied for 6 months, and for the first time a mediator comes in and listens to you, that cathartic thing of actually going, wow, somebody's heard me for the first time. And quite often in mediations we have boxes of tissues for people to cry, for example, and they're going, that release. And then we follow that through with a very definitive process of looking at what are the issues, how can we be creative, and how can we solve the problems, and then what kind of agreement do we need in the middle of that. But fundamentally it's about people, it's about listening, and it's about helping people find another way.
Yes, amazing. I just think, again, we'd have people who own their own business, a couple of staff, through to people who have a business of 600 staff. Is there different ways that they should consider implementing conflict resolution or mediation in their own business?
Well, I think for me, mediation, for example, should be part of that grievance procedure for all staff in every organisation. So yes, by all means, if you need to take your formal grievance over to this direction, but actually before that, quite often mediation comes in when things have got too bad. But actually, what if we did mediation before that conflict escalates to a certain level? What if we come in, what if it becomes part of the culture of an organisation to know that actually, this person is in our department with me, whatever that might be, we are having massive issues. Maybe if it becomes part of that culture, they can go to mediation beforehand, before it escalates. Maybe we don't lose those staff. Maybe they don't go off for 6 months. And maybe people that, and I talk about the tacit culture of that organisation, the stuff that happens behind closed doors, the reason why people want to stay in an organisation, how people talk when you leave a room or when you come into a room, maybe that changes that culture for the better as well.
Amazing. And are you surprised by how many companies actually understand it, how important mediation and conflict resolution is? I'm thinking of my own experience. I actually genuinely important, sure, on the list, but it's number 407. I didn't realise, but actually talking, I'm going, wow.
Quite often, again, my experience has been quite often, people go and search the internet for conflict resolution mediators when things have already peaked.
That's too late. It's went down the road.
It's went down the road, and absolutely, if the timing is right, if those individuals want mediation, want another way forward, a mediation can absolutely work. And yet, I think there's a whole education in the middle of that to go, well, if it was already part of your process, maybe you already had a mediation organisation retainer, maybe your HR people are trained up as mediators, whatever works for you, and there's pros and cons for having internal mediators and external, and it depends on your organisation, depends on the level of conflict and the complexity and all of that. And mainly it comes back to perceptions. What's the perceptions of your management to deal with conflict? What's your perceptions of your management to use the cliche, grasping the nettle, and moving from that really destructive conflict to something a bit more productive, you know?
Amazing, amazing. And what do you think the future then is? Conflict resolution companies should just get. It's not going to go away. It's more important than ever, probably.
Absolutely. I mean, turn on the news, right? You know.
Yeah, don't
don't
turn on the news.
You know, I often joke with people that, like, at least there's one thing, I'll never be out of a job, right? You know, in terms of that. But
well, people are people. Yeah, that's
absolutely. And when we go back to, I mean, for me, there's a crossover between negotiation and mediation. They're two separate processes, but the skills for me are very similar. You know, the ability to listen, to really get underneath, not just the positional element of what people say, but the interest and the needs fundamentally, and being able to dive into that as a good negotiator, for example. The ability to influence others, the ability to see the bigger picture and zoom out, the ability to really empathize with that individual and use your own emotional intelligence to shape. All those are key skills in mediation and negotiation. The process may be different, but the skill sets are very similar. So to watch your productivity rise, to watch your profit rise, as a good negotiator, I think is key to most businesses. And that runs hand in hand for me for alternative dispute resolution mechanisms such as mediation.
Incredible, excellent. So I'm learning a lot today. So if anyone wants to find out more about the courses on offer, or reach out and chat yourself
Absolutely.
about what they can do, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably the best way is their Leadership Institute website, which is again part of school management through Queen's. LinkedIn is where I spend a lot of my time, so by all means, or tweet us at Leadership QUB, or my own Twitter account is just Enda Young. By all means, give us a shout. And what I often say to people is, even when they finish courses with me, I'm here as a resource. So even this morning, I had an email from somebody who was on one of my training courses a year and a half ago, and they said, having this issue, what should I think about? So I'm more than happy to do that as well. So give us a shout at Queen's, or just connect with me personally. It would be lovely.
Amazing. And do you see more courses developing in the
Absolutely. So we're in the middle of just rebranding and retweaking a lot of our courses. We're looking at adding some diplomas and longer courses as well, and we're in the process of developing a longer mediation course at the moment as well. My next course is in November, so I might as well get a plug as well for that as well. So if you're really interested in looking at negotiation and how to have difficult conversations, which for me go hand in hand, I'll be running that in November, so just give us a shout.
Amazing, excellent. And thank you very much for your time
Thanks,
today.
man.
I was educated, probably I'm a wee bit worried now, so I need to, we'll be talking, but no, thank you again for your time, much appreciated.
Thanks very much, mate.
Thank you.
Cheers, thank you.
And thank you for watching. Hopefully you learned a lot today. Very interesting in conflict resolution and mediation. Do check out the links below, and connect with Enda on LinkedIn, of course, and on Twitter, and check out the Institute as well. Some amazing courses. That's us for today. It's Kieran from Profile 3. Hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Thank you again.